Hey there, philosopher. Are you ready to get into some pretty heavy stuff today?
Always up for a challenge.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because today we're taking a deep dive into hedonism.
Oh, very nice.
And I know you submitted some excerpts from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy on this.
I did.
So you've got a good foundation already, I think.
Yeah.
But we really want to go beyond just pleasure, good, pain, bad.
Right.
And kind of unearth some fresh insights for even, a philosopher like yourself.
Yeah, I think we can do that. Hedonism is one of those topics that seems simple on the surface.
It does, yeah.
But there's a lot to unpack.
Absolutely. So first things first.
Okay.
Let's define our terms a little bit.
Sure.
I think we both know the basic idea.
Yeah.
But can you lay out the different flavors of hedonism that we'll be kind of getting into today?
Absolutely. So when we talk about hedonism, we're really talking about two main branches:
Okay.
psychological hedonism and ethical hedonism.
Gotcha.
So psychological hedonism claims that all of our actions are ultimately motivated by a desire to seek pleasure and avoid pain.
Right.
So it's kind of like saying that pleasure and pain are the puppet masters of our motivations.
Okay.
Ethical hedonism takes a different angle.
Okay.
Ethical hedonism claims that pleasure is the only thing that is intrinsically good,
Right.
and pain is the only thing that is intrinsically bad.
Okay, so one is about what motivates us, and the other is about what we value.
Exactly.
I could see how those two things can get kind of blurred.
Yeah.
Especially when you have thinkers like Bentham saying things like, nature has placed mankind under the governance of two sovereign masters, pain and pleasure.
Right.
It does make it sound like we're hardwired for good vibes.
It's very compelling.
Yeah.
There's a part of us that really resonates with that.
Totally.
I mean, we all enjoy feeling good. But psychological hedonism,
Yeah.
as intuitive as it seems,
Right.
runs into some pretty big snags
Oh, really?
when you start to look a little closer. Well, for example, if pleasure and pain are the only things driving us, how do we explain things like altruism or self-sacrifice?
Right.
Are those actions secretly motivated by some kind of delayed gratification or self-satisfaction?
Yeah, are those people just in it for like the long con?
Well, exactly. It's a question that has kept hedonists up at night. And they've come up with some pretty clever workarounds.
Okay, I'm curious.
One of those is the distinction between basic desires and non-basic desires.
Okay.
The idea is that our basic desires are those that directly aim at pleasure,
Oh.
like eating when we're hungry or seeking warmth when we're cold.
Right, makes sense.
But then we have these non-basic desires.
Okay.
These are desires which might not be inherently pleasurable,
Okay.
but we pursue them because we think they will eventually lead to pleasure.
Okay.
So, a parent sacrificing their own comfort for their child.
Right.
This could be seen as a non-basic desire,
Okay.
driven by a deeper basic desire for the pleasure of seeing their child thrive.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so they're saying there's like a hierarchy of desire.
Right. Exactly.
But pleasure is still kind of like at the bottom of it all,
Exactly.
even if it's not immediately obvious.
Yeah, and that's one way to try to explain how seemingly non-pleasurable actions
Yeah,
could still ultimately be about the pursuit of pleasure.
I see. But even if we grant that distinction, can we ever really know if all our basic desires actually aim at pleasure? I mean, some things, yeah, they feel good, but is that the only reason we do them?
That's a great question, and it's one of the main criticisms leveled against psychological hedonism.
Yeah.
How can we ever really know for sure what's at the root of our desires?
Yeah.
Critics like Butler and Hume pointed out that humans seem to have a much wider range of desires than just pleasure.
Yeah.
Think about desires for knowledge,
Okay.
desires for esteem,
Yeah.
even desires for things like revenge.
Oh, right.
These desires seem to have their own goals independent of any pleasure that they might bring.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
And even if you could trace them back to some kind of deeper underlying pleasure, it starts to feel like you're stretching the definition of pleasure pretty thin.
It does, yeah. It's almost like we're putting the pleasure cart before the horse.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where things get even more interesting when we move from psychological hedonism to ethical hedonism.
Because now we're not just talking about what motivates us, but what makes for a good life.
Precisely.
And I have to admit, the philosophy for pigs critique
Mm-hmm.
always comes to mind when I hear about ethical hedonism.
I know exactly what you mean. It's a common caricature of ethical hedonism,
Yeah.
but it's a bit of a straw man argument.
Okay.
Ethical hedonism actually has a lot more nuance than that,
How does it?
especially when you start to consider the different types that have emerged.
Oh, really? Like what?
Yeah, it does. And I think for a philosopher like yourself, that's where the real meat of the discussion lies.
Good. I like meat.
Yeah, me too. One of the most important distinctions within ethical hedonism is between quantitative and qualitative hedonism.
Okay.
So you've got thinkers like Bentham,
Okay.
who focused on the quantitative side,
Okay.
believed that all pleasures are essentially the same.
Okay.
It's just a matter of how much you can rack up.
Okay.
So they develop these intricate systems
Okay.
for measuring pleasure
Okay.
based on things like intensity and duration.
So it's like a hedonistic calculus.
Exactly.
Maximize the pleasure units,
Yeah,
minimize the pain units.
exactly. But then you have John Stuart Mill,
Okay.
who throws a wrench in the works with his idea of qualitative hedonism.
Okay.
So he argued that some pleasures are simply better than others,
Interesting.
regardless of their intensity or duration.
Okay.
He famously said, "It is better to be a human being dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates dissatisfied than a fool satisfied."
That's the classic line.
Right.
It is. It
Yeah.
really does challenge that whole philosophy for pigs stereotype.
It does.
So how do you determine which pleasures are higher and which are lower, according to Mill?
That's the million-dollar question. Mill argued that we should defer to those who have experienced a wide range of pleasures.
Okay.
He called these competent judges, and these competent judges would naturally prefer the pleasures that engage our higher faculties.
Okay.
So things like intellectual pursuits, artistic appreciation, moral virtue.
Gotcha.
These higher pleasures, he believed, contribute more to a truly fulfilling life
Okay.
than mere sensual gratification.
That makes sense. It's like saying there's a difference between satisfying a craving and truly nourishing your soul.
Exactly.
But I can see how that opens up a whole can of worms.
Which does.
Like who gets to be a competent judge?
Right.
And isn't there a risk of elitism creeping in there?
Absolutely. Those are some of the main criticisms of Mill's approach.
Okay.
It can seem a bit subjective and culturally biased.
Yeah.
But even if we could agree on what constitutes a higher pleasure,
Right.
there's still the question of whether all pleasure is inherently good
Oh.
or whether some pleasures might actually be bad.
Wait, bad pleasure. How is that even possible? Isn't pleasure by definition a good thing?
It's a great question, and one that really pushes the boundaries of ethical hedonism.
Okay.
Think about things like sadistic pleasure,
Okay.
taking enjoyment in another's suffering.
Right.
Most people would agree that that kind of pleasure is morally wrong,
Yeah, I think so.
even if it feels good to the person experiencing it.
Right.
And that suggests that there might be more to morality than just maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain.
It makes you wonder if there are other values that might trump pleasure, even in a hedonistic framework.
Exactly. And that leads us to some of the most challenging thought experiments in this area,
Oh, like what?
like Robert Nozick's famous experience machine thought experiment.
Okay.
So imagine a machine that could simulate any experience you desire, perfectly indistinguishably from real life.
Okay.
You could plug in and live a life of pure bliss, free from pain and disappointment.
Wow.
Would you choose to do it?
That's a tough one. I mean, who wouldn't want a guaranteed happiness boost? But it does make you wonder if there's something more to a meaningful life than just feeling good all the time.
Right. The experience machine thought experiment really gets to the heart of what we value.
It does. Yeah.
Is it just the subjective feeling of pleasure?
Okay.
Or is there something more to it? Something about authenticity, connection to reality,
Right.
achieving something meaningful in the world?
Oh, yeah.
And if those things matter,
Okay.
then maybe pure hedonism isn't the whole story.
This is blowing my mind. I
Yeah.
feel like we've gone from pleasure good, pain bad, to questioning the very fabric of reality.
That's the beauty of philosophy, isn't it? It takes us on these wild intellectual adventures.
It does.
And even if we don't end up with all the answers, the journey itself is incredibly rewarding.
Speaking of journeys,
Yes.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on this as a philosopher who spent so much time wrestling with these ideas. How has engaging with hedonism, even if you don't subscribe to it, wholeheartedly shaped your own views on what constitutes a good life?
Well, that's a fascinating question. I think for me, grappling with hedonism has been less about finding the right answer and more about refining the questions I'm asking. You know, it's forced me to examine what I really mean when I talk about the good life. Is it purely about subjective experience, or are there objective values that contribute to a flourishing life, even if they don't always bring immediate pleasure?
It's almost like hedonism serves as a philosophical litmus test, right?
Yeah.
It forces us to confront our assumptions about what truly matters. And even if we ultimately reject that whole idea that pleasure is the be-all and end-all,
Right.
it can still help us clarify our own values and priorities.
Absolutely. For me, exploring hedonism has highlighted the importance of things like meaning, purpose, and connection.
Uh-huh.
Even if those things aren't always pleasurable in the moment,
Right.
they seem to provide a much deeper and more lasting sense of satisfaction
Yeah.
than just chasing those fleeting pleasures.
That makes a lot of sense. It's like the difference between instant gratification and genuine fulfillment.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about all the other philosophical frameworks that are out there that grapple with these questions of the good life,
Right.
like virtue ethics, for example, with
Yes.
its emphasis on character and living in accordance with reason, or existentialism with its focus on authenticity
Mm.
and creating meaning in a seemingly absurd world.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the most valuable takeaways from this whole exploration of hedonism.
Like that.
It reminds us that there's no one-size-fits-all answer to the question of what constitutes a good life.
Right.
Different philosophical traditions offer different perspectives, and ultimately it's up to each individual to figure out what resonates most deeply with their own values and experiences.
I love that. It's like we've opened this Pandora's box of philosophical inquiry.
We have.
And now we get to go forth and explore all these different pathways to the good life. And speaking of exploration, I want to thank you, our brilliant expert, for guiding us through this fascinating deep dive into hedonism. I feel like I've gained a whole new appreciation for the complexities of this deceptively simple philosophy.
It's been my pleasure.
And of course, a huge thank you to you, our philosopher listener, for providing the spark for this incredible conversation. We hope this deep dive has given you some fresh insights to ponder. And to all our listeners out there, we leave you with this final thought. If happiness isn't the ultimate goal, what is? What values and principles will guide your pursuit of a truly meaningful life? Keep those philosophical gears turning, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.